Okay, here we're going to, a comment that comes from Brutus Albion, who questions the reference in the Quran about the Farthest Mosque. What is this Farthest Mosque? Is it the Dome of the Rock? Could it be any place, is what he's saying. Let me just read his comment and then I'll respond to it. And this is what he says. Okay, I'm not a Muslim, but wouldn't the story about Muhammad going to the farthest mosque, this is the Miraj that we talked about in the last video, where he was woken up in the middle of the night. He then is told to get on the back of the winged horse, the Buraq, who flies him up from Mecca all the way up to Jerusalem. And there where the rock is, you can see a picture of the rock right here. He then ascends the 7 heavens, comes back down again, and with the 5 prayers, and then returns back on the Buraq back to Mecca. This happens, according to the standard Islamic narrative, the Islamic traditions, this happens in 621. So it's just the year before he moves back up, moves to Medina. So that's what he's referring to. So he's saying, would this journey, going to the farthest mosque, simply refer to the farthest temple that is dedicated to God rather than an actual Muslim temple, in other words, a mosque? Mosque, he says, is just a term used by Muslims to refer to a holy site dedicated to God, in other words, the temple. Then it surely is possible that the furthest mosque is simply the farthest temple that is dedicated to God. That's all it's saying. When you consider that many churches and mosques were converted back and forth between mosque and church, depending on who controlled it, it does make sense that a church can be a mosque and a mosque can be a church in that context. So it could be any one that he's talking about. Now, there are 3 problems right off the bat. It is by all, number one, all Muslims believe that chapter 17, verse 1 is referring to the Aqsa Mosque that is in Jerusalem today. Let me just read verse 1 of chapter 17. Glorified is he who took his slave for a journey by night from Masjid al-Haram, almost every Muslim believes that is in Mecca, to Masjid al-Aqsa. Everyone I have talked to believes Masjid al-Aqsa would be the mosque that is there on the same citadel that you find the Dome of the Rock there in Jerusalem. The neighborhood where we have blessed in order that we might show him of our ayat. Verily, he is the all-hear and the all-seer. So that's chapter 17, verse 1. Now, I don't know of any Muslim that would consider that to be a temple or a church or something else in another city or in another place. It is very clear that all Muslims that I am aware of, no, I've not talked to every Muslim, but every Muslim that I've heard on the subject has always said that is Al-Aqsa. And if you go up to Jerusalem, that's the story that you get up there as well. So that's the problem. You've got to go with what they believe. They believe it's in Jerusalem, and they believe that this whole story in chapter 17, verse 1 took place in 621. Now, you do mention, and it says, even the farthest temple, that he goes from the great mosque to the farthest mosque, or the farthest temple. That in and of itself is problematic, because it is the farthest temple. If it is Jerusalem, there were many temples and there were many churches that were even further than that. All over Europe there were temples and churches. So you can't say it's a temple or a church, because those are even farther. So this is obviously that this is the farthest mosque. And at that time they're saying this was a mosque. And this then comes to the 3rd problem. And this is the problem that most Muslims don't know how to respond to. Because historically speaking, this just does not make sense. Everybody knows that Jerusalem was not in the hands of Muslims in 621. There were no Muslims or Arabs or whatever you want to call them. They did not control Jerusalem that early. The battle for Jerusalem was not until 636 and 637. It wasn't until 638 that Sophronius finally, the archbishop, finally gives over Jerusalem to the Arabs. So 638, you're talking about 17 years later that this city could have even come into Muslim hand, to say any of the fact that there were no Muslims living there that early, because Muslims had not yet left Mecca and Medina according to the Islamic traditions. I'm just using the Muslims' own story against them. if they're going to say that this happened when Muhammad was still in Mecca in 621, and that there were Muslims and there was a mosque in Jerusalem in 621, they don't know history. And that's why it stands to reason, therefore, that it looks like that chapter 17, verse 1 of the Quran was written after 638. And certainly I would suggest even after 691 or 709, depending on what you believe Al-Aqsa is. For Muslims, they say that that building here, this building right here, that is Al-Aqsa on the southern wall of the citadel. There is the Dome of the Rock right in the middle. And Muslims consider that to be Al-Aqsa. But there are some Muslims that believe the entire citadel is Al-Aqsa, and that is the Mosque of Umar. Some say it's the Mosque of Solomon. I mean, there are so many different references, it's hard to know which one to go with. And then others would say that Al-Aqsa could have even been the Dome of the Rock. But most people today believe that the Dome of the Rock is this building right here, one with a beautiful yellow dome, and that the Al-Aqsa Mosque is the one that's right here on the southern wall. Now, the Dome of the Rock built in 691 did not exist in 621. The Al-Aqsa Mosque that Muhammad supposedly went to in the Miraj, in the Night of Power, in 621 was not built to 709. 709. If you're talking about 709, you're talking about almost 90 years later. Almost 90 years later. Can you see the problem? And that's why we're putting this up as a historical anachronism. This just doesn't make sense. Unless, of course, the Quran was written after 709, which I would suggest is what's going on here. This was written after 709 when the people who put the Quran together, just as we've seen with the earlier video, they borrowed from the Christians, they borrowed from the Syriac Aramaic, they borrowed from the Nabatean Aramaic, they borrowed from the Jews, the Apocryphal writings. So much of the Quran is borrowed from so many other sources, they didn't know or really care whether or not it was historically accurate or not. We do. We care whether it's historically accurate, and that's why we're asking this question. And that's why we're throwing this back at Muslims and say, whoever put the Quran together did not know their history, did not know when Al-Aqsa was built, and therefore chapter 17, ayah 1 is a historical anachronism, is a real problem for Muslims. Hope that helps you. Thanks so much, Brutus Albion, for your comment. This is Jay. Over and out.